Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Patti Brennan Show. Whether you have $20 or $20 million, this show is for those of you who want to protect, grow, and use your assets to live your very best lives. Hey, guys, I am so excited about today's podcast. Today, we have Kathleen King with us, not necessarily in the studio, but with us to talk about how she started Tate's Cookies and some of the trials and tribulations that she went through, and then how she got to the other side. Kathleen, welcome to the show.
Hi, Patti. Thanks for having me.
So, Kathleen, you can't see me necessarily, but first and foremost, for those of you who are watching, I am surrounded with Tate's Cookies. They are my favorites. And I have to tell you, and I hope this is good news for you. So we went to the store to get the cookies, and there's a cookie section. It's probably 10 feet wide and all the way up. Do you know that there were only 6 bags left? That's how popular these cookies have become. Now,
that's good.
For those of you who are watching, somebody in the studio, because we have a podcast studio, somebody in the studio was looking at what I'm wearing and said that I look like I was in Candyland. Well, I may not be in Candyland. It's more like Cookie Land, everybody. And we've got the nation's expert on how to bake the best cookies, Kathleen King. So let's just start out, because I think that the purpose of having you on the show today, Kathleen, is really to learn some of the lessons that you learned in starting your business when you were 11 years old, why you might have started it, how you grew it, what happened, and how you had to start all over again. So let's start from the beginning.
I started baking and selling cookies when I was 11 at my dad's farm in Southampton. And, it really wasn't my idea. When you grow up on a farm, the minute you walk, you work. And at 11, he told me I was old enough to buy my own clothes for school. And he said, you can bake cookies and sell them at the farm stand, which, was right outside our home. So I was like, okay. Back then also, no was never an option to your parents. So he just, I started baking and selling cookies, and one thing led to another. And by the time I got into high school, I was baking, 10, 12 hours a day, 7 days a week in the summer.
And were you doing all of that at the farm?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. I was only selling to the farm stand. And then, I wanted to be a veterinarian, but I was smart enough to know I wasn't smart enough. So I said, well, I'll have something with these cookies. Maybe I'll do something with that, And then I went to SUNY Cobleskill for 2 years. And when I graduated, I started making cookies again at my mom's kitchen. And at the end of the summer, she asked me what I planned to do. And I was like, I don't know. And she said, well, can't use my kitchen anymore.
Wow.
I was like, okay. And she said, but there's a bakery for rent, up in town. So go check that out. And I was like, okay. And that's what I did. And so I started renting that bake shop because I needed a job and I needed to move out of my mother's kitchen. And my mother was awesome. Because, she saw what needed to be done, and she pushed me to do it like she did my whole life.
It sounds like she believed in you probably even before you believed in yourself. And she was just kind of guiding you and nudging you maybe to do something that you didn't necessarily want to do, but you needed to do, right?
Yeah. I was the youngest of 4, she believed in me, but she also, they pushed you.
Yeah.
They just pushed you to do, just to do your best. They weren't, the type that, set you out to go to Harvard and be in the corporate world. They just wanted you to do your best and did not ever let you have, fears. Or, I remember when I had to drive once upstate for the first time and my friend didn't come. And so she said, what are you going to do? And I said, well, I'm not going to go. And she said, yes, you are.
Mm.
And like she kind of made me get in the cars back with no cell phones, no nothing. She wrote down the directions for me, and she said, "You're gonna go." And
Wow.
I'm like, I could die on the side of the road. And she's like, "Bye." And it was that kind of spirit that
Mm.
made me who I am, because I don't have fears. I'll get in the car, drive wherever. I'll do this, I'll do that. I mean, and it's all these pivotal moments um, of parenting, really.
Yeah. That's amazing. That is so interesting that it was helping you to kind of blow through your fears and just do it anyway. Because we all have fears, right? So you had the bake shop. Um,
Hmm.
you were baking in the bake shop in Southampton. Things started to take off, but it wasn't called Tate's Cookies back then, was it?
No, it's called Tate's Bake Shop
Oh,
now.
right.
And back then it was Kathleen's. It started as Kathleen's Cookie. Then I changed it to Kathleen's Bake Shop because Kathleen's Cookie was limiting. It only made it sound like we had cookies, and we had
Mm.
more than that.
See,
And
you
I
did.
had to,
Yeah, I was just going to say you didn't need a Harvard degree to figure that out. You just figured that out on your own.
yeah, well, not like a Harvard degree would be bad,
Right,
but
right.
I was not capable of achieving it, no matter how much my mother pushed me.
Well, you and me both. So that's fantastic. So you had Kathleen's Bake Shop and you were baking, the cookies and everything else that went with it. This was going really well, I guess, right?
Yeah, I mean, I always did well, honestly. We always had good sales. I continued to grow. I put all my money back into the bake shop. When I was 23, I outgrew my space. Again, I said to my parents, I have to move. My space is too small. And my mother, my mother said, "There's a bakery for rent up the road. I mean, a bakery for sale,
Mm.
not a bakery, a building for sale up the road." I was
Mm.
like, "Oh, right." And she said, "Well, it doesn't hurt to call." Like, fine. And then, the usual, "Did you call?"
Right.
No. So of course you have to call because you want to stop the conversation.
Absolutely.
And so I call, and I just got lucky. The guy that was selling the building was willing to hold the mortgage. And I had 40,000 and I needed 50 as a down payment. And back then the interest rate was 9.5%.
Mm. There you go.
And it was a 15-year term. And so I managed to scrounge up the other 10,000, and my business plan was then so I moved into that building when I was 23.
So did you keep the original bake shop or did you move entirely into that new building?
No, I moved into the new building because it was just up the road.
Fantastic. Fantastic. So you had this local following who loved you, believed in you. How did it get like I have a place down in Avalon, New Jersey.
Hmm.
We can't get these cookies. They just go off the shelves. So when did it become less local, I should say?
I started wholesaling soon after being in business because into the city, I brought cookies and delivered them and started building my wholesale business then because it was a seasonal resort area out here, and I wanted year-round employees, and also not to start every spring in zero.
Mm-hmm.
So
Wow.
I just continued to build on that, first starting with Manhattan and then the East Coast and then the West Coast and then the middle,
So
and I was doing that with Kathleen's Bake Shop. And so when I was 40, I made a bad business deal and took on two partners and ended up losing everything. And
wow.
then so then I had to start all over, and I lost my name, Kathleen's Bake Shop, and I had to start over. And that's how I came up with Tate's Bake Shop. That was named after my dad.
One of the things that I think is fascinating about your story is that
Uh-huh.
pivotal moment when you took on these two partners, and these partners were moving Kathleen's Bake Shop into a direction that you wanted no part of. And the reason had nothing to do with financial necessarily. It had to do more with the quality of the product.
The quality of the products was going down rapidly.
Mm-hmm.
Also financially, they were driving the business into the ground. They were not paying anybody. They were ruining the integrity of the entire brand. And when I started paying vendors, they came up and fired me.
And the reason that you were paying the vendors from the Southampton shop is because they weren't doing it from the Virginia place. And
exactly,
that says so much about your integrity, that you wanted to make sure that your employees were getting paid, that you considered your vendors partners, and they deserve to be compensated based on the agreements that you had with them. And the moment that happened, when they weren't being paid, that's not okay. That was not okay in Kathleen King's world. And you found a way to make sure that they remained whole. I think that says so much about you. And, you know, the fact that your new partners didn't look at it that way and came up and actually fired you when you were the one that started the whole thing. That's just an amazing story.
It happens all the time to people.
I know, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It does. And it's just, what is amazing to me is that, yes, it happens all the time, but what happens next doesn't typically happen. So what happened next?
Well, I remortgaged the building I bought when I was 23 and was able to get money to start Tate, and just had a mission to grow the business and sell the company when I was 55. And we built the brand, and I hired a business manager, and we put together plans, and he was fantastic with projections, and I just executed.
So,
and at that point, I was not emotionally attached anymore. You know, Kathleen's Bake Shop was like my baby. So Tate's Bake Shop was a business, and that's where I learned everything.
Wow, that's powerful. So in my lingo, in our lingo, it's the difference between having a financial planning or a wealth management practice and having a wealth management business. Very different approaches to this world. And you found the same thing. Rather than being so emotionally attached, it was a business. You treated it like a business. You got the right people on the bus to do the things that needed to be done. I'm curious, did the plans, like as you worked with this manager, you set a plan, did the plans change a lot? Like when you first started, when you were 40, did you anticipate that it would do what it ended up doing and growing as it did? Or did you make a lot of changes?
That was the plan. No, that was the plan. My plan was to grow a business, to sell at 55 so I could retire. And once you have your plan and you have your goal, then it's about executing. A lot of people don't even have a goal. And then they're just like driving all over the freeway, looking for the right store. You know, you set your goal, and you execute.
I think the execution is the most important thing. There's a book that I read probably about 10 years ago that really changed my life and my business, and it's called The 4 Disciplines of Execution. And it was written by Sean Covey and 2 other authors. And they talk about exactly what you're referring to. It's one thing to have a plan. It's quite another to act on it. And it's the actions that you take to execute on the plan that make all the difference in the world. Otherwise, it's a fairy tale.
You choose every day what you want to listen to.
Right. Boy, is that the truth. Because it's true. We all have been hit, slapped around from time to time. It doesn't mean we stop, and it doesn't mean that we necessarily listen to all of the feedback. To me, like criticism and failure and all of that negative stuff, to me, failure is just, the discovery of something that didn't work, right? So do something different. Same thing with criticism. First and foremost, you got to understand who it is that's delivering it. And then secondly, to take it, think about it, and say, okay, is what is being said valid? And then what am I going to do about it? Because sometimes I can tell you personally, some of the best feedback that I've gotten, and some of it has been negative over the years, they were the greatest moments that it was like, wow, thank you so much for telling me that, because if I didn't know, I couldn't do anything about it. And because you were courageous enough to share that with me, I get to do different. And here's what I'm going to do about it. I'm not only going to do different, how about I circle back in 6 months and let you know, and let me just touch base and make sure that the changes that we're making are effective. And I think that's what people really appreciate, is the fact that, we're you show me any successful enterprise and I'll show you an enterprise that got there through trial and error. And we have our plans, we have our vision, we share that vision with the team with the understanding that, it's not going to be a straight line all the time, and people are going to come back and give us different feedback that we may not be, aware or ready to hear. And we either make the adjustments or we don't, but we don't lose sight of the end goal. For you, Kathleen, it was 55, I'm done. Because as I understand it, the reason that you had set that is because doing what you were doing was a 24-hour job. Like, it was a lot. It's consuming. Any business owner out there listening today will probably agree. When you are starting, no matter what season of life a business is in, it can be consuming. And at the end of the day, you're not going to take it with you. So to ask those questions, what's really important? What is your legacy? What gives you joy? What makes it fun for you? Etc. Those are the things. It's not, to me, it's not just achieving for achievement's sake. It is, what kind of impact can we have on other people, in other people's lives? And that's what you did with Tate's Cookies, your Tate's Bake Shop. I mean, all of the things that you've done. And it's just amazing to me that you had the courage to start all over again, accrue some debt. That's scary for a lot of us business people. It's like debt is sort of like gaining weight. It's easy to put on. It's really tough to get it off. And especially when we're building and we've got other liabilities and other people, because debt is that thing out there, that big, ugly thing. And we've got people also that, have devoted their lives, have devoted their careers, and need to be compensated, need to have their futures. So as we pursue our mission, at least for me, I want to make sure that I'm helping other people live their best lives as well, to pursue their missions and to figure out what that is with them. And in doing so, it's amazing how learning about those people and being on the same team, they make so many contributions that I personally could never do. Like, I might be halfway decent at one or two things. That's pretty much it. So I need all these people to do all the other stuff that needs to get done. And I think for me, that was probably, I don't know, we have our pivotal moments, epiphanies. Personally, I had a lot of epiphanettes, which meant were a lot of little lessons along the way to course correct. But I think that from your story, you had some major, major pivotal moments. And then to me, the most impressive thing is when you got there, you're like, okay, I'm done. And that was it. And you were able to get, a different set of partners involved, and they've taken Tate's Cookies to a, whatever level that they wanted to take it. And now you get to live your life. So here's the question for you. What's that been like? Because you were consumed, and those are my words, Kathleen, not yours. But, when you were 11 years old, you needed to buy a pair of jeans. So you're going to bake some cookies, right? So yeah. From the age of 11 to the age of 55, double nickels, That was your
Mhm.
life.
Yeah.
What's it been like since? Because a lot of people come to me and say, "Well, Patty, I want to retire. I want to retire." And part of what we do here is to prepare them for what that might look like. Let's do a dry run. So, what's that been like for
Mhm.
you?
You know, retirement is great. I was ready for it and I wanted it, and I gave up my youth to work, and so now I like doing fun things. I don't join boards. I don't join committees. I'm philanthropic, but mostly from behind the scenes. Um, I'm trying to learn Spanish. I take dance lessons. I taking some ceramic class. I travel the world. Um, I have time for friends and family, and I'm a cyclist, so I cycle around. I just live my life.
And are you living your life in the same town where you started
Yes.
your? Wow, that's really cool. That is so cool that you did it and you remained and you're there, same community. You're the same person.
Mhm.
You're not different.
Mhm.
You're just getting your youth back. You're doing the things that maybe you didn't get a chance to do earlier on. And I think that
Right.
it is so cool that you're developing those neural pathways. What I've learned over the years is that some people do the opposite of what you've done. You're doing so many different things that you never had a chance to do. Too many people, they
Right.
retire. Like my father-in-law, the day he retired was the first day of the end of his life because he wasn't
That
engaged.
happens, and it's not to for one against the other, but it's more common with men.
Oh, 100%.
The, that I've in my observations, because women are so multitasking
Mm-hmm.
creatures, you
Yeah,
know, that we're used to it. Work is more of their identity,
right.
where for me, I'm like, Tate is just a part of who I am. You
Mm-hmm.
know, it's not my identity,
It's just something that you did.
really.
Hmm. Yeah,
It's something I did, it's something I created, and I'm proud of it, and I'm happy that people love it. Um, but I feel like I have so much more. It's just up. I think it's just the way people get their upbringing, and men and women in general. We're not all the same.
absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that, for me, the takeaway that I've gotten from you is that, you know, in this next season of life, because that's what it is, you're just doing
Hmm.
different things and you're staying engaged. And, you know, it's so interesting because the amount of money that people have doesn't define them either. Although some people think it does, only to find that it's just really an empty promise. That we are who we are because of the people that we surround ourselves, the lessons that
Hmm.
we have learned, and what we give back to
Hmm.
others.
I live in a wealthy area, and it's been shocking to me since day one, and shocking to me now even, that how people think money makes them a better person.
It doesn't. It's not money itself. It's what people do with it. And it's a better person or a worse person. I got to tell you, there are a lot of really super wealthy people that I know who are great people,
Hmm.
and there are really
Hmm.
super wealthy people who are awful, mean, demanding. I've fired them because I'm not going to tolerate it. You are
Yeah.
just because you have a lot of money
No,
doesn't
but
mean
it's the
anything.
same. I mean, it's the same, and we can say that about every group.
True.
You know, I mean, there's always good and bad. It's just it's just shocking to me that that's the general attitude. Some of the people that have money think that they're actually better than somebody else.
Yeah, I think the pedestal stuff is where it really becomes a problem because the people who don't have money assume that the people who do are really smart or they're really this or really that. And in fact, the person who is just starting out or who may not have, they're phenomenal people who would give their shirt off their backs. That to me is just that impresses me far more than somebody's bank account. So let's pull this together. If there is anything that you could share, lessons in business, things that you learned, do's and don'ts, as it relates to whether it be business related, your current season of life, what would you say?
I would say never take on a partner because it's false sense of security. I would say perseverance is key. Be prepared for hard. Be prepared for sacrifice. And try to maintain balance in your life because nobody ever knows how much time they're going to get.
So true. Boy, is that so true. It's interesting because I used to close seminars and when I'm talking to audiences, and I use that hourglass example. And I would take an hourglass and I'd flip it over and I would say, none of us really know how many grains of sand we actually have or when the last grain will fall. And
Right.
I personally so appreciate that Kathleen King has given us a few grains of sand today. And I really appreciate everybody who's listening and watching this show today because it's big. And I think your points are so important for us to remember. The thing about, be careful about taking on partners. No matter what, persevere, grind through it because it's not always going to be easy. This stuff is hard. And then last and probably most important is understand balance. And I would probably add to that, if I may, Kathleen, that balance is one of those things that, there are different times in our lives. I can speak for myself where I've been completely unbalanced. And I just needed to have some perspective that was okay, that was just that period of life when my business was first starting and I have 4 kids and my life was my business and my family. That was it. There was no community involvement. There was no spiritual. I wasn't going to mass. I wasn't doing any of those things. And I just had to accept that was the season and that had to be okay because things weren't easy. And these kids didn't ask to be brought into the world. Ed and I brought them into the world. That was a responsibility. And so sometimes life doesn't always feel balanced. I think in the end, we make our life choices. It's like what, Susie Welsh said in one of the meetings that I went to. We don't always have work-life balance. So maybe we reframe it and call it work-life choices with consequences. So I didn't have any community involvement. So the hospital didn't even know that I existed. And when my kids graduated, they're like, wow, Patti Brennan. Gee, who's Patti Brennan? And they came to me and said, wow, you have an amazing national reputation. We didn't know that you were here. It's because I didn't tell them. They had no idea that I existed. And so that's okay because I wasn't ready for that. So they've invited me to get involved. And it's been so much fun to get involved in the hospital, help them merge with Penn, yada, yada, yada. So, balance is so important because it makes us feel whole, like real people, because that's what we are. We are people. We are not our money. So Kathleen, we'll wrap this up. I can't thank you enough for your time today. I've learned so much from you and about you, and you got the substance. You're so impressive to me, and I'm so grateful that you took the time to share some of your insights that you learned in business and in life with all of us today.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you. And thanks to all of you for joining us. It's been really fun. Thank you so much for sharing it. And by the way, a special shout out to Tim King from John Hancock, because if it wasn't for Tim, Kathleen wouldn't have joined us today. So Tim, thank you so much for everything that you do. He's our executive producer outside of Key Financial. He has brought so many great people onto this podcast program, and most notably, Kathleen King. So thanks to all of you for joining us today. Take care.